Apparently I'm not on. Apparently I. Yeah,
How well are you feeling? Let me see if I can step up here or not.
not feeling bad.
You look good. You
Thank
look
you,
good. I
thank you.
hope you can fully recover from
Yeah, I've got
what you've had.
I got a new problem this week, but I'm on the. I won't mention it because I'm on the speaker
Yeah,
already.
you are already. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for coming up and saying hi.
Okay, yeah. You're
I
very
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Good to
Well,
always see you when I've been at home. The different things I've been listening to you guys,
thank
and
you.
I've really enjoyed the lessons.
Appreciate that.
They
Appreciate it a lot.
really encourage me. So thank you.
Right. Okay, I appreciate you coming up. Okay, folks, we're about ready to get started. A lot of excitement here over the baptism and the sermon, everything. So, Lord's Supper was wonderful. Joseph did a really good job there. He used to be one of my students at Lipscomb, and he's our missionary now. Well, as I used to begin class, I'd say ladies and Gentiles, but ladies and gentlemen, uh, we're glad you're here, and Stan and Cheryl are away on their 32nd wedding anniversary in a trip. So I'm glad I was able to be here today. So we'll get started here, and let me see. One of the things that happened last week was that some of the slides didn't come through. That is, Stan said there was some kind of a problem whether we got ready to, but now they're coming through. So he asked me to again just quickly go over this introductory material. So here we have, as you see, highlighted in yellow, servant of the Lord, God's covenant, a prophet, priest. Moses wore a lot of hats. And what people usually don't know, we've mentioned several times, and it's really important to understand. And I never heard it mentioned until I was doing a serious graduate study on Exodus, and that Moses had a tremendous education. It was in the book of Acts already, in chapter 7, told us that he had been trained in all the wisdom, all the knowledge of the Egyptians. And then when I was a student, I began, on my PhD, I began to study, well, what did that mean? What kind of a training background did Pharaoh's children have? Because he would be treated as one of the children. And I've said this before, I don't know a better way to say it. It was like he had 2 or 3 PhDs and about 20 master's degrees. He wanted to know something about everything and had to know something. He had to have the ability to be a leader. He had to, they actually trained them as warriors. One of the greatest warriors in Egypt's history was Tutmosis III, and he was Moses' kind of half-brother, step-brother, because Moses was adopted. And so in battle or in training, if he found a warrior who could draw a bow, his bow, he had another bow made stronger. He wanted to be the only one who could draw that bow. That's how strong he was. And so Moses was trained that way. Moses was trained in geography and geology. He knew where he was going. When he fled, when he came back to lead them out of Egypt, he knew where he was going. He was trained in magic. He was trained in oratory. You say, well, why couldn't he speak? Well, it had been 40 years, and he didn't want to go. He was reluctant to go, and God said, well, take Aaron. He can speak. And if you'll notice, Aaron never gets to speak. When they get there, Moses is the guy that does all the talking. So he quickly adjusted to that. And on, mathematics, languages, many languages. How do you suppose Moses wrote the Pentateuch? Very few people could write. people communicated, but very few people could write. I remember studying about a tribe in Massachusetts of Indians that this missionary taught them about Christ. They could speak well, but they had no language, no written language, no spoken. I mean, they could only speak. They couldn't write. They couldn't read. And so he taught them. He took the Latin alphabet and made a translation with that Latin alphabet so they could pronounce words. You know, it's just like remember what Tonto used to say, "Kimasabi." You know, so you just write down what people say, and of course they could actually read his translation and understand. That was the first translation ever made in America. It was made in Massachusetts, 1700 something. So anyway, Moses was really well equipped, and people need to understand that, and that's why God had him in Pharaoh's house and trained him that way. So, Stan was trying to show this. So then again, he highlighted all the things, just an incredible numbers of things, kind of laying out Moses' life. And so he wanted me to show you that, and I'm sure they're watching from New Orleans. Then again, we've just mentioned it. Moses was reluctant. He just really didn't want to go and had all these excuses. So God is trying to show him, you know, I'll show you ways to demonstrate my power. And so we're going to take you to one thing was these snakes. Again, the Egyptian scholars, the diviners, the holy men were trained in a lot of things. Of course, you could grab a snake at a certain point. I have a book with me I meant to bring up and show you. It's called Moses and the Gods of Egypt. It's written by a scholar who's dedicated his life to that. And he explains in his book how you could grab a snake a certain way and freeze that snake. And anyway, they knew all these kind of tricks. But as you know, Moses' snake, when God had him throw down the staff, it turned into a snake. And when they got to the court, Moses' snake ate up the other snakes. So God was trying to teach him not to hold back and not to be afraid. And then we have this just a quick picture. This is just one. God told him to put his hand in his cloak, pull it out, it became leprous. Then, of course, God took the leprosy away. So this is one of the things that God is trying to show Moses. And when he finally gets ready to bring the people out, the very first miracle should have really convinced Moses, because he did what God told him, and it happened. We'll come back to this miracle, but we have a few slides showing you something about trying to give you an impression. I think we briefly showed this last week. We've got to understand that the Nile was the lifeblood of Egypt. You take away the Nile, Egypt would have been pathetic. They just couldn't have been much of anything. I believe it was 95, pretty sure 95, when several of you went to Israel with me. We also went to Egypt. And as you fly from Cairo down to Aswan, we flew down to Aswan, then we took a cruise back up the Nile to one of the ports, and then we flew back the rest of the way. But as you fly, you look down, you see the blue Nile because there are no clouds in the sky. I remember joking with Sandra Parker. I think we might have still been in Jerusalem, and it was a day that had no clouds. But anyway, in Egypt, there's no clouds. So I said to Sandra, I said, you know, I'm the only cloud here today. And she laughed, and she made me get up on a stand, and she took my picture of a stand with no clouds behind it. So, and sent that to me when she got home. But in any case, the Nile, you see the blue Nile is very, very blue because it's reflecting the sky. And then you see maybe a couple of miles, 2 or 3 miles, maybe 5 miles on each side, green, really, really green. Then nothing but desert. Everything else is desert. And so almost 99% of the people lived on the Nile, right there at the Nile. This is from the Ten Commandments. It was a scene, not sure where they imagined that. What happened is the Nile was filled with lagoons. Why? Because the waters were filled with crocodiles. You could not swim in the Nile without being eaten. Every once in a while today, you'll look in the newspaper or on AOL or something, and you'll see a shot taking you back to, taking you over Africa someplace, and you'll see some worker there washing clothes, and a crocodile will grab that person. That's above the Aswan Dam. From the Aswan Dam northward, southward, when you get to the Blue Nile, the White Nile, etc., all those rivers are still loaded with crocodiles. But the Egyptian government cleaned all the crocodiles out from the delta all the way to the Aswan Dam. There are no crocodiles at all. And that's why. So they had these lagoons. And so as you, like Pharaoh's palace, would have had lagoons coming to it from the Nile, and then they blocked up the end with reeds so that the crocodiles and other large animals couldn't get in. So Moses' little basket was put in one of those lagoons. Okay, so anyway, then of course before they leave, he said, Aaron will speak for you, but you really don't see a clear example of Aaron speaking. As we've said many, many, many times, the Hebrew word for prophet is a person who has been summoned or called, and you understand by Yahweh to be his mouthpiece. True prophets said, "Thus saith the Lord," because the Lord had spoken to them. False prophets said, "Thus saith the Lord," and the Lord hadn't spoken to them. Pagan prophets said, "Thus said Baal, thus says Marduk," that whatever god they were having. But the Hebrew only has the one word, the one who's called, the one who is summoned. And then we actually translate it with the Greek word prophetes, the word prophet, which means to speak forth. So anyway, I believe that most of the Old Testament was written by prophets and holy men. And the Old Testament tells you that there are people like Nathan and other seers that were involved in the writing. So anyway, we've talked about that already. So we decided to get you, kind of bring you up to date on where we were and try to show the things we could do before. So anyway, this is all talking about the reluctance as we talked about before, and part of it didn't come through last week. That's why he wanted me to do it. This again is a scene from the Ten Commandments. We probably not really sure that Moses was with his wife Zipporah was that close to the mountain. He may have been. We still have debates among scholars where is Mount Sinai. And so we're going to show you some maps trying to picture where Mount Sinai is. But we started, there were so many things to discuss, as you know. And John Mike has spent a lot of time today on things beyond this, things after in numerous places where they were in the desert. So we're going to kind of lead you up to that point. And again, we don't know much about Zipporah, exactly, but we do know that the area she came from, Midian, and So that's just one of the many shots you can see on the internet. Uh, so anyway, as you know, that when you get ready to go, Moses has got to convince the people. He's got to convince them that God has actually appeared to him, tell them something about who God is. A lot of their traditions had been lost, and try to explain to them. And they wanted to know who spoke to you, who came to you. So God had already told him, you're going to tell them something about my name Yahweh, which we have explained to you, probably means the one who creates, the one who causes things to be. And so when Moses asked that question we saw earlier, God tells him, basically what he's saying is, tell them the verb to be sends you. And so there's a play, and so the reason that we translate I am, it's kind of traditional, but it's good translation. We translate I am, I will be, I exist. All of that is based on the verb to be. And so it makes sense, as we tried to point out last week in John 8, when Jesus is being criticized for basically making it clear that he was before Abraham. They criticized him, and then he said, before Abraham was, I exist, I am. It's a play on the same thing that takes place in Exodus, the nature of God, the eternity of God. In John's gospel, when he begins, in the beginning was the Word, the Logos. He uses the verb to be there. In the beginning was the Word. Several verses later, it says, oh, there was a man named John, named John the Baptist. That word was there is a totally different word. It's a word that says there came into existence. There was born a man named John the Baptist. Verse 1 says that Jesus already existed, always existed, but already existed before creation took place. That was the idea. Okay, so anyway, the study of the plagues are quite interesting, and the reason I was going to bring a book to show you, I tell you just as well. The book by a man named Davis is called Moses and the Gods of Egypt. We play down sometimes the gods of Egypt, but there were at least 80 gods. We're just going to talk about 3 of these plagues, and then we'll just quickly go through them. But there was all kinds of gods in Egypt, everything you could imagine. There was a god, there was deity. Pharaoh was always born of some god. Ramses, as John Michael mentioned, the word R-A is sometimes spelled R-E, usually pronounced Ra or Re. The god Ramses' name, if you look at a cartouche with the Egyptian on there, it has a picture of the sun, so you say Ra, and then it has MSS, meaning to be born. And so it says, the name on the cartouche of Ramses the Great says, born of the god Ra, or Re. And so many of the gods, Tutmosis, born of the god Tut. And so just person after person. The ancient name for the land of Egypt actually is not Egypt. Egypt is a Greek transliteration of the name. The name for the land of Egypt many times was the land of the god Ptah, P-T-A-H, the land. So Greek came along and wrote Aiguptos, which is transliterated, comes out in English as Egypt. So that's where our word Egypt came from. It's actually a transliteration of the name. But there were several names for the land of Egypt, but one of them was the land of the god Ptah. So there are many powerful gods, and Pharaoh himself claimed to be a deity. And so many of the things about Pharaoh, whoever was the Pharaoh, was that. The name Pharaoh itself means the great house, the big house. So Pharaoh Ramses means the Ramses who lived in the big house. It'd be like us calling uh, Biden, White House Biden, or calling Trump when he was president, White House Trump, or Roosevelt, White House Roosevelt. So that's what really Pharaoh means, the one who lived in the giant palace. And so that name became standard for the pharaohs. But each of these plagues is connected with an Egyptian god, maybe more than one god. And we just have a hard time grasping that. Even countries like Assyria and Babylonia didn't have the massive number of gods that the Egyptians had. And we couldn't read hieroglyphics until the Rosetta Stone was discovered. And it's right there in the delta on the western side. They found this massive rock, and with 3 languages carved on it. We could only read one of the 3. It was Greek. Greek never has, gone out. It's always been studied and still is studied, still spoken in modern Greek. They changed the sounds, but still spoken. And so we could read the hieroglyphics. We could read the cursive script the Egyptians had, but we could read the Greek. And the first thing that a man named Champollion from Egypt, from France, saw was these cartouches. He said, if we could crack those cartouches. And he found out they were names of kings. Some royalty would be in the cartouche, whether it would be Ramses, Tutmosis, Amenhotep II, or whomever it was. And so they were gradually able to crack the code and read the hieroglyphics. It's a picture language, and we've showed you some shots of that. So here are the plagues right here. So let's just kind of go through some of them. As you know, we've already talked about the Nile turning to blood. And again, with the Nile being so important to the Egyptians, you take the Nile away, they couldn't survive. And so it was a very shocking thing. And the Nile was a god to many, many, many people. Now, what they do now, the trip we went on in 95, that was the year that Tanya Tucker went with us, and several people from this congregation went. But what they did is, on our cruise, just happened, we were there at that time, they lowered the Nile so people could clean out the canals. And you could see the canals were just filled with all kind of garbage and things they threw in the different canals. And so they spent that time cleaning it up. And I remember we were cruising down the Nile, and there was a little island we were coming to, and we didn't know he had to stay to the left. But then I noticed to the right, I saw a dog walk across. There was a stretch about here to that wall over there, and a dog walked across that. That's how shallow the water was there. But we were in the middle at a canal. So, anyway, so the second plague was frogs, and Egypt had plenty of frogs already, but they were just overwhelmed with the frogs in the plague. Followed by gnats, and it was really kind of an interesting thing. I was going through this presentation Friday night or Saturday, I can't remember, when Stan and I looked at it together Friday, that he went out of town Saturday. But I think it was Saturday I was going back through it one time looking at it. And I got finished, and there was something crawling on my paper. It was a gnat. Ended his life in one shot. But anyway, when you got a lot of gnats, we go crazy. The flies, we just again don't think about it unless we're in a place where there's a lot of flies. I don't know about most people, but if we get one fly in the house, we go crazy till we get to kill that fly. It just worries us to death as it runs around. I see people smiling, been through, been through some of the same deal. But if you were, I've been a few places where we overcome. We at the dig in Israel, on the very first dig I went on, we had so many flies, and they had it was a caboose that made two things. The caboose used to have a certain project. They'd have something they did, and this project made rolls and rolls of plastic paper. That was one thing. The other thing they did was grow watermelons. So when we took our first break about 11 o'clock on the first day of the dig, it was 97 degrees during the night. And then during the day, it was like 107 degrees. And so we were out there and took the break and came in. They had cut all these watermelons on this table. They had cut all these watermelons for us. And you could have all the watermelon and all the flies you wanted because they were just covered. The flies would just come and attack the watermelons. So anyway, so when there's just millions of flies or whatever, you can drive you out of your mind. And the livestock died. You can imagine how traumatic that was for the people. And then this was about the best representation I could find. I wanted a better representation, but about the one about the boils. Of course, you know, again, we go crazy if we have one boil on us. And so this at least gives us an idea. But these are all very detrimental. And of course, we become extremely afraid when we have things like hail. It just won't stop. And we've, I don't know if this is true every year, but we've had, it seems like, more storms this year. My grandson, every time they got ready to play soccer, it rained. And he came to last week, and they were getting near the end of the season, and they had a game scheduled Monday night, Tuesday night, if they won Thursday night, Saturday. And they still ended up having a terrible time playing. They get there and have lightning, delayed the game an hour, hour and a half. And in fact, I think it was Friday or Saturday before that, they were just desperate to play. They had to play because school was ending and all that. And so at the last minute, they rented, this will blow your mind, rented a helicopter. And the helicopter company paid them $250 an hour, which shocked me. I thought it'd be about $1,000 an hour, but $250 an hour. They came and they hover over the field and dry it up. And the helicopter landed at Duncan's high school, and it was raining, so they waited. And about an hour later, the field was just covered with puddles, and so they just said they can't do it. They flew off. But anyway, they had to cancel that night. But anyway, just tremendous amount of rain and storms and this year, and you get a little afraid sometimes. There's times, you know, when hurricanes, you folks had your share here. We didn't have as bad in Franklin, but the Spring Hill got hit south of us. So it's hail, lightning, all that can be very frightening. So that was a cartoon, but I thought it did a better job than most of them did. And locusts, you know, locusts, if you're overwhelmed by locusts, of course, your crops suffer. And so then we come back to talk about the deities. We could have talked about the deities on every one of these. But darkness, why was darkness so frightening? Well, I've been to Egypt 5 times, and I really can't remember seeing a cloud one time other than looking in the mirror. The only cloud I ever see. It's just incredible. It's just like, you look at it, you just can't believe how clear it is. So the cloud, and then, I mean, and no clouds, and then you have the sun god, because the sun god was, most of the time, the sun god was the main god. Again, there were gods that were went from periods where one god kind of took over the main god. But the god Amun was very famous. The god Re was very famous, and then they combined them together. Had Amun Re became the deity. So for the sun god to be blocked out was a shocking thing to the Israelites, to the Egyptians. They just couldn't grasp, what was going on here. And so these days of darkness, we always don't like it, especially if there's storms. We don't like it. But just for it to become totally black. We were playing in a World Series, and I'm trying to stop and think of the year. David was 15, so that would be 89. We were playing in a World Series in Iowa, and we got up, and it was just like Egypt, just not a cloud in the sky. And so we began playing and didn't know a tornado was coming. And it was about 10 in the morning, and all of a sudden it began to get dark. And it was a brand new field at a brand new high school. We were completely surrounded by corn. That is, the field was, if you hit a ball over the fence, it went into corn, and it was in July or early August or something, I think, July. And so anyway, we were leading, and it looked like the team that ended up winning the World Series was the team we were leading. And all of a sudden, it just began changing. And within an hour, it was almost totally, like we were sitting in our car watching the game, and we were, very, very close to the field. But we couldn't even see the ball players. And they had built these benches, they had built the dugouts, so they were off the ground, so that when a storm came, it would blow through them. And so, but we looked back and saw the building that was right behind us, this tall building, that concession stand, and it looked like it was moving. It was really scary. And then it passed, but it was so dark we couldn't even see the dugouts where they were, and we weren't that far away. Really scary. And it blew through. It missed us, but it went right down through downtown Cedar Rapids and tore up a lot of things in Cedar Rapids. We were about 10 miles outside the city. So it can be very scary. And then, of course, the deadly death of the firstborn. Pharaoh, as I said, was looked upon as a deity and looked upon as a god in this whole mixture, and usually the son of some goddess or some deity, as I indicated a while ago. And so to have the firstborn in every household killed was a devastating thing. And again, Pharaoh was powerless. And this whole thing shows how the magicians in Egypt, the diviners, the holy men, all of calling on their gods, begging their gods to help. And Pharaoh, being himself supposedly a deity, nothing could stand in Yahweh's way. So this is the scene as you go through these 10 plagues, and the making it clear that these deities were not real, that they had no power. It's like in the book of Jeremiah. People worship some of these deities, and Jeremiah, God says to Jeremiah, tell these people, here are these gods that are carved out of wood or maybe made out of stone. They have ears, but they can't hear. They have eyes, but they can't see. So, anyway, in every house there was firstborn had died. There's an interesting thing that I think we mentioned very briefly last week. We argue about when the Exodus was, and as scholars argue. Basically, they've come down to two main dates, called an early date and a late date of the Exodus. I'm convinced because of 1 Kings 6:1, it says 480th year after the Exodus, Solomon began building the temple. I'm convinced the Exodus was somewhere around 1446 or somewhere in that area. And so the Pharaoh at that time, the main Pharaoh of the oppression, was probably Tutmosis III, who was powerful Pharaoh, and who the princess was his stepmother. The princess who pulled Moses out of the river was, I believe, Hatshepsut. If that's true, then Moses would have been an older child and would have been a threat to Pharaoh. Moses left and was gone 40 years. When he came back, Amenhotep II, the son of Tutmosis III, was the Pharaoh. And I believe he's the one who was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And we found a stela, a monument, that was, if you look at a picture of the Sphinx, the big Sphinx there, we dug between his paws, archaeologists did, and they found a stela. They now call it the Dream Stela. And Tutmosis IV is the one. He's the son of Amenhotep II, what I think was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And he says, I would have been king, but my older brother died. Now think about that. Amenhotep II, if he's the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and his oldest son dies, that would have been the brother of Tutmosis IV. And he said, I would not have been made Pharaoh had not my older brother died. So that's why scholars like Ailing and Kitchen and all different scholars believe that some believe Ramses and some believe Amenhotep II was Pharaoh. So let's see here. I need to move on. Okay. Of course, here's when they put the blood on the doorpost and the angel of death that would pass these houses that believed enough to do that. So it says, the plagues resulted in the judgment of all the gods. So it's a judgment about the gods, on the gods, and that's what I've been trying to explain to you this morning. So anyway, the Israelites leave, and we're going to take you to a picture here because we're going to be running out of time in just a minute. I'm just going to run to the Red Sea crossing. I want to show you a couple of things here. The Red Sea crossing, I'm going to show you a picture of Egypt and the two gulfs. They're still part of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Suez. So you have if you're going to make the traditional Mount Sinai, which is between the two gulfs right there in the middle, right below, you'd have to have them cross at the word Suez, at about an SU right there, and go straight ahead, and they'll come to the traditional Mount Sinai. On the other hand, if you come down on the right-hand side, eastern side of the Suez Canal, and then cut across and make your way to the Gulf of Aqaba, and you cross there, you'll come to the Mount Sinai that David Cruz believes in. He believes in that view, and there are many people that do believe that view. So here's a picture of that. So if you, a lot of liberal scholars want to make the Israelites cross the Sea of Reeds. They call it Sea of Reeds, or the Bitter Lakes, where the water is only, sometimes a few feet deep, and the wind would have to blow so hard, and it makes no sense at all, because that same phrase is used about Solomon when Solomon had a fleet of ships on the Red Sea. Well, if he's got a fleet of ships on the Sea of Reeds, his ships aren't going to go very far. I mean, they're not going to move at all. And so the best translation is the Red Sea. And so anyway, you come to this place there that has a large beach. So we'll try to show you a little bit about that. You can see a large beach there. And then there's a couple different ways to get there, but there's one place that David believes in, that where you have mountains on both sides. If you got mountains on both sides, the Israelites were blocked in, and then when they come to the sea, they're blocked in as they get ready to cross the sea. So they're stuck, and the Egyptians are coming behind them. And so that text tells you that. And then, so here we'll give you a few shots that we put together, them crossing. And here's the Egyptian army being destroyed where they try to cross. So I don't believe it was a natural occurrence. A lot of people who just can't believe in miracles. Oh, there was a natural occurrence. There was a wind blowing. It had to be a small amount of water like the Sea of Reeds in order for that to happen. Well, it's incredible that people would believe that God could create the world and God do all the things he does in Scripture and that God could do this. It just doesn't really make any sense at all. And so it says, the Exodus 14:22 literally says, that the waters were a wall for them. And trying to explain this away makes no sense at all. And people with low view of Scripture just have to find a way to explain it away. So, the week ahead, have you ever been asked to do something that you know you are qualified to do and can do, and yet you do not want to agree to it? Stan put that in there and talk about Moses. He was well qualified. That's what I tried to make clear the last couple of weeks. He was well qualified. And yet, he was reluctant to do it. So sometimes, I guess, we are too. And so this was Stan put this in for the prayer. And basically, God, you made all grace abound to you, so that having sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. God, you do not call us to something only to leave us to fend for ourselves. You are with us, provide for us, enable us to finish the assignments you give us. We will be strong and courageous. We will not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord our God is with us wherever we go. Amen. Thank you for being with us today. Appreciate it so much.